when there's another financial crisis and everybody is looking to blame the bankers, there's going to be a pretty obvious solution this go round. I think if 2008 happened today, Bitcoin would be the obvious answer.
Because I know you were kind of critical of Bitcoin in the past. So what did it actually take for you to, like, what kind of clicked? Like, what are some things where, like, maybe before, like, you didn't understand, or we were like, oh, this actually, this kind of is interesting. That kind of made you rethink things. I'm curious, like, if somebody else is watching this and they have holdups, what are some of the things that were holding you up before that made you think, like, oh, maybe this isn't just like a complete nonsense, Ponzi scheme, whatever you want to call it.
I think just like understanding how the network works and using an analog that the network is like, it's like one of those bike locks, that's got the numbers on it. And, every time one person hands it to another person to use, like, they can reset the code and they get one more digit. And so, the more the lock gets passed around, the longer the password gets and the harder it gets to crack. And, the the cryptography for Bitcoin is similar to, I mean, that's really dumbing it down. But the more it's used, the stronger it gets. And the larger the network gets, the more decentralized it becomes. And the more decentralized it becomes, the more secure it becomes. And the less chance people other than those using it have say in its destiny. And so to me, the appeal to it becomes the fact that it has a chance to really democratize money, and it has the chance to be a real off ramp out of the central banking and fiat world if the people want it to be. Detractors would say that it relies on the confidence of the people that use it to maintain its value. And that's kind of the truth, because the more people that adopt it, the stronger it gets. And, the higher the hash rate goes and the more nodes there are. And so the network strengthens as more people adopt it. It has a chance to be something brand new. And it has a chance to be one of the first things I've ever seen that returns some power from the central banks to the populace, to the everyday person. And I just haven't seen a lot of that in the last, 15 years, aside from to the extent that I like gold. But this is, Bitcoin is completely different from gold. They're two completely different things. It's, Bitcoin is the invention of digital scarcity, right? And so the decentralized nature really makes it extremely unique. I wrote in my piece, like, if there's one thing that I can believe in and I can get behind, it's returning power to the people. And it's the idea that, there may be something out there bigger than what I think is completely Ponzi-ish central banking system that the whole world is on, the fractional reserve banking system. And so this emerges as a contender and has, been alive and kicking for 13 or 14 years. And once I wrapped my head around how the cryptography works and how the network works, it just makes it clear that, look, it's not going away anytime soon. And especially now that you have Wall Street behind it, anything they can make fees off of and they have an interest in perpetuating, they're going to. I mean, I see the ETFs as a huge inflection point because it's essentially a blessing. It's a tacit blessing from Wall Street that at least in some way they're going to get behind it. And if they're only behind it to get fees now and they're not behind it as a store of value, that I think will change as adoption continues. I still think we're very early in the adoption cycle for Bitcoin. And I think as long as the hash rate continues to go up and as long as the number of nodes continue to grow, and as long as it's backed by the most powerful computing network on the face of planet Earth, you pretty much have a right to be on the forefront of emerging technologies as it relates to, cryptographic currency. And so I think the next thing that's going to happen is I think one of the Middle Eastern countries is going to put it on their balance sheet. So it won't just be El Salvador. And then it's like, let the game theory begin at that point. And then it becomes, then you have a whole new set of questions, which is, what do the gold versus Bitcoin allocations look like for central banks? Like, will any other central banks take it on? What does it mean in terms of validation? I just saw today, without a source, but somebody wrote on Twitter that the BRICS nations were considering a
Stable coin.
digital,
Yeah.
yeah, digital stablecoin. That's what it was. So you saw it also. And so, and it makes sense that things progress to digital means. I mean, that's what's happened with the compendium of all human knowledge as we've known it. It's gone from, these massive, voluminous libraries that we used to have and maintain to, an SD card that's like this big. And it's like everything we've ever known or thought throughout the course of the entire human race. And so the same thing will happen with money. And it's just a question of, what role Bitcoin will have and how it will kind of be tucked in there. But I'm encouraged by the fact that the ETFs got approved. And I really do feel like as though it is getting past a too big to fail point just from an adoption standpoint. That's not to say I don't think the price m- may go down again because I think it might. I still think there's a lot of fraud and excess in the crypto ecosystem that has to get shuffled out. I think there's probably still a lot of questionable happenings with Tether, though I can't put my finger on it. But my guess is that we'll see some more spectacular blowups in the crypto space, and we'll see some of that excess get pulled in, and we'll probably have like a crypto winter 2.0. But that's not to say that Bitcoin's not going to be standing at the end of it, because everybody that knows what it is and how it functions knows that doesn't matter what kind of song and dance you do around it. Like, the network operates the way the network operates, and that's the way it's been going for 13 years, and that's the way it's going to be going for the foreseeable future, especially now that we have all these people that have a vested interest in protecting the network. So if you bring on, if Qatar goes out and decides they're going to put 5 billion on the Qatari sovereign balance sheet, not only do you have adoption, but you also have another major interested party that has a vested interest in protecting the sanctity of the network. And so,
Yep.
just like the security, the network grows in strength and in size as adoption continues. And so, it's then the
You know,
question just becomes like, have we reached that peak inflection point yet where, the network is going to get to some level of homeostasis and just, hum along adoption wise, or is there still room to grow? And I think there's still plenty of room to grow. So as long as that's the case, you know, short to midterm, I don't have any reason to think that Bitcoin is going anywhere. And
yeah, I mean, there's so many memes in Bitcoin in terms of like we're so early. That's one of them. Like, oh, we're still so early, but it's so true when you look at the total addressable market, when you look at all the actors that still aren't in that manage trillions and trillions of dollars, central banks, governments, Wall Street just kind of dipping their toes in now. One of the like sectors of the economy that haven't been disrupted by technology is the financial sector. Maybe that's because they have regulatory moats, whatever the reason may be. It's so archaic these days. If anyone tries to send money, they know that. And I think that the Wall Street ETFs could be like a Trojan horse. They were bringing in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin actually is a better way to send value. It's faster, it's cheaper than a lot of these traditional alternatives, and these banks make a lot of money off fees still, transaction fees. And when it comes down to it, the whole financial system is completely ballooned because of the financialization that has occurred because of the fiat money that we're in. The easy money, the debt has exploded, financialization, financial products, the entire financial advising industry. Basically, it's because the money doesn't hold its value. So it pushes people to have to invest their savings. If the money itself could just hold its value over long term, people wouldn't have to take risk
sure,
and take on advice from people. And how do you invest my money? How do I just protect my money from losing value? And if Bitcoin comes in here and it's like, oh, you can actually save in Bitcoin, well, the idea is that there's going to be a great definancialization that occurs over the long period of time. And it's actually going to shrink Wall Street, whether they realize it or not. And I'm talking like long time period here. But what do you think of that as like these ETFs as like a Trojan horse? Like they're embracing it now for the
well,
fees, but they could just be embracing a Trojan horse that'll actually disrupt them
look, do you
in the
want
long
Wall
run.
Street to back it or not? I mean, if it's a great idea and it's going to survive and it's been going to become the global like digital Unicode for money, I mean, everybody in every financial sector everywhere in the world is going to get behind it to some degree. So I think from an adoption standpoint, the ETFs are a good thing. If there's some backdoor Trojan horse to, usurp power on the network or whatever, well, you know, I'd be happy that I'm in before everybody. That would be number one. But thus the beauty of the network, right? See if you can get half the nodes. I don't know. You'd be faced with a lot of questions that the network hasn't had yet. But I don't see it as that, anyways. I don't think there's some nefarious like underpinning from Wall Street to go in and try to, um, usurp power.
No,
I
I
think.
think I think Bitcoin is the Trojan horse that's gonna usurp power from Wall Street by
Oh,
them
yeah,
accepting
that
it
might be
in.
the case.
That's what I mean. Like,
No, no, no.
they
Yeah,
can do what they want. They could try to attack it, but that's gonna be a test for Bitcoin, and it's like, that's a good thing. Bitcoin will be tested in every single way we can possibly think of. People
yes,
will try to hack it. People will try to take control of it. If it can't withstand these attacks, then it's going to fail.
and
But
that's
you have to believe
that,
in the incentives and the security, and that it can withstand any of these attacks in order for it to ultimately succeed.
and I think
Um,
like the one thing that could standardize Bitcoin. I wrote an article called, I think the one thing that I think could standardize Bitcoin is if you do have another financial crisis and you have another like Occupy like you did in 2008. Like the answer for those people that want to opt out of the system, who were so pissed at everything that they were, I
yeah,
don't know, living in tents outside of City Hall, getting in my way as I was trying to walk to my bartending job. I don't know what they were doing. They were banging drums, they were dancing
I
around.
remember that. Yeah,
It was, there were some odd smells coming from those camps. I'm not trying to take away from those people because what, as I said before, whatever you're into, I support. I was walking around my Ron Paul sign still till this day. I just interviewed Ron Paul on my podcast like,
oh, nice.
6 months ago. But when there's another financial crisis and everybody is looking to blame the bankers, there's going to be a pretty obvious solution this go round. I think if 2008 happened today, Bitcoin would be the obvious answer. I mean, people would be like, "Hey," and the crazy thing is, again, like the democratization is extremely powerful because if enough people decide they want it to work, it's going to work, and that's it. It doesn't matter if the U.S. and Canada and the EU decide to say we don't want Bitcoin. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll say it's used for money laundering, and it's the same with gold. Maybe they'll say we need to seize your gold again, and we're nationalizing the miners. And they may say the same thing about Bitcoin. We need to seize your Bitcoin, and we're going to nationalize the miners. Um, but if that happens, like the crazy thing about the decentralized nature of it is, doesn't matter. People are going to move to Poland or Finland or Mauritius or whoever, or in El Salvador or wherever embraces it. So you'll see this like, kind of global. I mean, you've already seen like migration to El Salvador just due to Bitcoin, right? So it's had this kind of magnetic effect on people that buy into the ideology. And so if enough people, it's like how many billions of people? There's 7 billion people on Earth. How many of those billions do you need to get behind something before the time for it has decidedly come? It's like, what's the old saying? You can't stop an idea whose time has come. That'll just be a lesson to all of the elites in power that the people still make the decisions. And so, it's like that last COVID lockdown they tried to do in China. It was only like a year ago or whatever. They decided, like, we're doing one more lockdown. There's another variant or some bullshit. And people in China, which is the last place people find their First Amendment voice and protest, they just said, "Fuck it, we're not doing it." Like they took to the streets and they protested. And in China, that shit like never happens. And the government came out, a week later and said, we're rescinding the COVID restrictions. It's like, yeah, what happened? All of a sudden you were reminded that you had 3 billion people in your population, and the bureaucracy in Beijing is like 1,000 guys in suits. So when it comes down to brass tacks, like who's gonna win? What are you gonna do? Nuke your own people? Like, come on. And so it's the same deal with Bitcoin. There's a lot of strength in numbers, and Bitcoin kind of returns that strength to the people, and thus the basis of its appeal to me. I like that. I keep trying to figure out analogies that make me say what I'm thinking about it better. But
Mhm.
you know, I see it as a currency, and so I see, when you buy it with US dollars, I see that as like an FX pair, right? So I see, here's just, you're swapping one currency for another, and I see it as like this like digital Unicode for money. And I know I'm using that wrong, but like, just kind of like it's like a layer of digital money that just kind of usurps, it can usurp everything. It doesn't yet, but has the potential to be, it'd be like if everybody on the earth spoke English. You wouldn't need to figure out what language everybody's speaking in, because everybody's speaking in the vocal Unicode for language, which is decidedly English for some reason, or it doesn't have to be English, Mandarin, whatever. Um, but monetarily, Bitcoin allows everybody to speak the same language.